For 5 years, I worked overtime every single day to build our company. Just when we reached success, my husband cheated on me, took over the company, and threw me out on the street. But he didn't know one important thing. My late father already knew his true nature. Before he died, my father didn't leave me savings. Instead, he handed me a secret weapon. Before we begin this story, write in the comments which city or country you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep growing and bringing you more and more interesting stories. The clock on the wall of the Apex Global offices struck 11 p.m. Only Emily's desk remained lit, surrounded by stacks of reports and the scent of instant coffee that had gone cold in her mug. Emily, wearing the simple hijab she often wore when working late, massaged her temples, which were throbbing with pain. 5 years, 5 long years she had dedicated alongside Mark, her husband, to building this company from scratch. What began in a small garage borrowed from a relative had become 3 floors of modern offices in the city's financial district. Emily smiled faintly as she remembered everything they had fought for together. Their marriage had begun with love and equally big dreams. Mark was a charismatic man with an ambitious vision. He was the one who knew how to talk, who made connections and convinced investors. Emily, on the other hand, was the foundation of it all. She made sure those big dreams had feet to stand on. During the first 2 years, while Mark focused on designing the business concept, Emily worked 3 times harder than anyone. From morning to evening, she worked a full-time job as an administrative assistant at another company. Her entire salary was given to Mark for Apex Global's operating expenses. In the afternoons, instead of resting, she rushed to tutor high school students in math in the neighborhood. She used that money to pay the installments on the motorcycle so Mark could easily get around looking for clients. At night, when Mark was already asleep, Emily stayed awake in front of her old laptop, managing a small online clothing store. She saved the profits bit by bit as an emergency fund for the company. Emily never complained. For her, seeing Mark's satisfied smile when he closed a project was reward enough. She was willing to wear the same clothes over and over, to endure hunger and eat only instant noodles at the end of the month, to postpone her desire to have children, all for Apex Global, all for the future they would build together. Mark always told her, "Be patient, honey. When we're successful, you'll be a queen. You won't have to work anymore, you'll just enjoy the results." Emily believed in that promise with all her heart, and that day, Apex Global had finally truly taken off. They had just won a huge bid from a multinational corporation. The profits coming in next month exceeded the total revenue of the last 3 years combined. This was the pinnacle, the fruit of all her sweat and tears. That night was their 5th wedding anniversary. They should have been celebrating together. But Mark had told her he had an important meeting with a new client out of town and would probably be late. Emily understood, as always. However, since the big bid had been officially won that afternoon, she wanted to surprise him. She quickly tidied her desk, not caring about the pending reports. Tonight, she wanted to celebrate their victory. On her way home, she stopped at the bakery they used to frequent and bought a small chocolate cake with the inscription, "Happy 5 years, Apex Global." She smiled, imagining Mark's tired but happy face when he saw this little surprise. Her car entered the driveway of the house they had bought 2 years ago. Proof of their initial success. The house was also registered in the company's name, a suggestion from Mark to reduce taxes. Emily didn't understand much about those things. She trusted her husband completely. Something was strange. Mark's car was already parked in the garage. Emily frowned. Hadn't he said he had a meeting out of town? Maybe it was canceled or ended early. All the better, she thought. The surprise would be even more perfect. She entered the house with soft steps. Silence. The living room light was off. She walked towards the kitchen to put down her work briefcase but stopped as she passed the stairs. The light in their bedroom was on and she heard voices. It wasn't Mark on the phone, but laughter. Her husband's laugh, followed by the laugh of a woman she knew very well. Jessica, Mark's new secretary, who had only been with them for 3 months. Emily's heart pounded, and she swallowed hard, trying to think positively. Maybe they were discussing work matters. Maybe Jessica had brought important documents. She went up the stairs one by one. Each step felt as heavy as lead. The bedroom door was ajar. Through the crack, the scent of an unfamiliar perfume, Jessica's perfume that always filled the office, hit her nose, and then she heard the conversation. "You're incredible, Mark. You finally landed that big contract," Jessica said in a syrupy voice. "Of course, but I'm exhausted from pretending in front of Emily. She works like a dog. Look at her, always so frumpy. Always in that same simple outfit." "She actually thinks the company could have grown without me," Mark replied. Emily's heart squeezed as if gripped by a fist. "So, when are you going to divorce her? I can't wait to be the lady of this house anymore," Jessica begged. "Patience, darling. I'll have everything ready soon. She's so foolish, working hard to pile up money for us to enjoy. We just have to wait for the right moment." Emily's legs gave way. The cake box she was holding tightly suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Her world collapsed in a matter of seconds. With the strength she had left, she pushed the bedroom door wide open. Mark and Jessica, in a compromising position, turned in surprise. Mark's eyes widened. Jessica let out a small shriek and hurried to cover herself with the sheet. But Emily wasn't looking at that. She only saw her husband's face, the man for whom she had sacrificed everything, and he looked back at her without a trace of guilt. The cake box fell from her hands. Its contents splattered across the cold marble floor, right at Mark's feet. Silence. Only Emily's ragged breathing could be heard as she held back tears and fury. Mark was the first to break the silence, not with an apology, but with a sigh of annoyance. "Why are you back? Shouldn't you be working late?" Emily looked at him in disbelief. "Working late? I've been working overtime every day for 5 years, Mark, for this. So you can bring another woman into our bedroom in the house I helped pay for?" Her voice trembled violently. Mark got out of bed, feeling no need to cover himself in front of Emily. He casually picked up his robe. Jessica, behind him, smirked sarcastically as she also got dressed. "That's enough, Emily. Don't overreact. What happened, happened," Mark said in a cold tone. "Overreact." Emily laughed bitterly as tears began to stream down her cheeks. "I sacrificed my youth. I worked 3 jobs. I never bought new clothes for myself so this company could function. And you tell me I'm overreacting?" "That was your choice," Jessica interjected suddenly, her voice sharp. "You chose to be the foolish wife willing to be a slave. Mark needs a partner on his level. Someone beautiful who knows how to take care of herself, not a neglected woman like you." "Shut your mouth," Emily screamed. She took a step forward, intending to slap Jessica, but Mark stopped her abruptly. He squeezed her arm so hard that Emily winced in pain. "Don't touch her, Emily," Mark hissed. "She's right. I'm sick of you." Emily froze. The man who used to hug her tenderly when she was exhausted now looked at her with hatred. "What did I do wrong, Mark?" she whispered. Mark released his grip and walked to his desk in the corner of the room, opened a drawer, took out a brown folder and threw it on the bed in front of Emily. "We're getting a divorce." Those 3 words hit Emily harder than the scene of infidelity she had just witnessed. "Divorce? I've already taken care of everything. There are the papers. You just have to sign," Mark said as if he were discussing a simple work contract. Emily shook her head. "No, I don't want to. Apex Global. That company belongs to both of us. We built it together." Mark laughed. The most terrifying laugh Emily had ever heard in her life. "The company? Are you sure it's ours?" Mark took another folder from the same drawer, opened it, and showed her a document. "Read this, especially this part." Emily read it with blurry vision. It was the company's articles of incorporation, but there was an additional sheet, a share transfer agreement. It clearly stated that Emily agreed to cede her entire shareholding and transfer it to Mark, and at the bottom was her signature. Emily was in shock. She didn't remember ever signing that. "When?" "Don't you remember?" Mark asked with a cunning smile. 3 years ago, when we were processing new permits, I slipped this document into the pile of tax papers you had to sign that night. You were exhausted, as always. You didn't even read it. You trusted me completely." Emily's heart seemed to stop. This betrayal was much deeper than she had imagined. Mark had planned this. For 3 years, he had let her work like a slave for a company that legally no longer belonged to her. "So, Apex Global is 100% yours?" Emily asked. her voice barely a whisper. Exactly. And this house, Mark spread his arms, was bought in Apex Global's name, so it's my house. It's not yours anymore. Jessica approached Emily and looked her up and down with contempt. You heard him. Now take your bag and get out of here. Out, you beggar. Emily looked at Mark, searching for even a hint of compassion in her husband's eyes. There was nothing, only a cold, impatient stare. Go, Emily. Take your useless things. I don't want to see your face again, Mark threw her out. But it's already midnight. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, Mark said as he pushed her out of the room. Emily stumbled. Mark pushed her down the stairs. Jessica followed, carrying Emily's work briefcase from the kitchen and throwing it onto the porch floor. Hurry up. Get out of here. A torrential rain suddenly began to fall, as if the sky itself was weeping for her fate. Mark pushed her out the front door, barefoot, with only the work clothes she had been wearing since the morning. Mark, don't do this, Emily screamed as she pounded on the door. The door closed tightly. The porch light went out. Emily was left alone in the darkness under the downpour. She collapsed on the porch of her own house, the house she had dreamed of, the house she had built with her blood and sweat. Now she was being thrown out like an animal. Everything was destroyed, absolutely everything. Her marriage, her company, her life. Emily cried inconsolably in the rain. She didn't know what to do. She had no one left. Her parents had passed away long ago. She had no money. All her savings had been deposited into the joint account that Mark had surely already emptied. After an hour of crying into the void, Emily stood up. Her body was soaked and trembling from the cold. She picked up her work briefcase. She had to leave. She walked aimlessly in the torrential rain. Her feet hurt because she wasn't wearing shoes. Finally, she reached a bus stop. She sat on the cold, empty metal bench. There was only her and an indescribable pain. She opened her briefcase, searching for anything left. Her wallet was there, but it only contained her ID and a few small bills, not even enough to rent a cheap room. Emily dug deeper into a compartment of her bag that she rarely opened. She felt a small notebook-shaped object. She pulled it out. It was a bank passbook, old and worn, a faded blue color. It was in her name. It was an account her late father had opened when she was a child. Her father had been just a mid-level manager at a state company, but he loved her deeply. Before he died 10 years ago, he had given her this passbook. This is your account, her father had told her back then. Dad put a little money away for you. Don't use it unless it's a real emergency. Consider it a lucky charm from me. Emily opened it. The last time she had checked it was 7 or 8 years ago. The last printed balance was $10, zeros and dollars. She had never touched that money. She had completely forgotten about it. $10,000. Right now, that money was everything. It would be enough to survive, to rent a small room, to buy food for a few weeks. First thing in the morning, she would go to the bank. She would withdraw all of it. It was the only hope she had left. Emily hugged the small passbook to her aching chest. The rain continued to fall heavily. The morning sun pierced through Emily's eyelids. She woke up in a stiff position, sitting on the bus stop bench. Her body felt shattered. The remnants of the previous night's rain had left her thin work clothes damp and cold, stuck to her skin. Her hijab was undone and messy. Her bare feet were sore and dirty. Hunger twisted her stomach. She hadn't eaten anything since noon the day before. But that hunger was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Mark's cold face and Jessica's mocking smile kept replaying in her mind. The betrayal felt so real, piercing every joint of her life. She had been thrown out of her own house from the company she had built with her sweat. Now she was homeless. But Emily didn't allow herself to cry again. Her tears had dried up. All that was left was determination. Determination to survive. She fumbled in her briefcase, making sure the worn blue passbook was still there. There it was. That small object was the only anchor she had in this world. $10,000. She had to get that money today. She stood up, her body trembling with cold and hunger. She walked with difficulty, avoiding the sharp stones on the sidewalk. The bank she was looking for wasn't far, about 2 miles from that stop. She passed by it every day on her way to the office. Before, She saw the imposing bank building from the comfort of her car. Today she was walking towards it barefoot. Every step was torture. People rushing to work looked at her strangely, some with pity, others with disgust. Emily lowered her head, hiding her face behind what was left of her hijab. She felt so small, so humiliated. She, who was once a manager at Apex Global, who led meetings, who was respected by employees, now looked no better than a beggar. Upon arriving in front of the bank's glass doors, she hesitated. A sturdy security guard watched her with suspicion. Emily swallowed. She tried to fix her wrinkled and dirty clothes, but it was useless. She took a deep breath, ignored the guard's gaze, and walked in. The cold air from the air conditioning immediately hit her damp body, making her shiver violently. The bank was crowded. Customers waited neatly in chairs, fragrant and clean. Emily felt like a stain on the pristine white marble floor. She walked to a corner, towards the restroom. She needed to clean up, even just a little. Inside the restroom, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, her lips chapped. She washed her face with cold water, trying to regain some clarity. She fixed her hijab as best she could. She washed her dirty feet in the sink. She didn't care if anyone saw her. She had to look presentable, at least enough not to be thrown out immediately. Feeling a bit better, she went out and took a number for the teller window. Her heart was pounding. What if the account was no longer active? What if the money was lost? What if there were administrative problems? Her number was called Window 3. Emily walked to the counter. A middle-aged man with glasses smiled at her kindly. On his chest was a name tag that read, Mr. Henderson. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" Emily's voice came out hoarse. "Good morning, sir. I'd like to withdraw the entire balance of my savings." She handed him the old blue passbook along with her ID. Mr. Henderson took them. He looked at the old passbook with a slight frown. Then he looked at Emily and back at the passbook. "Very well, Mrs. Miller. Allow me a moment. I'll verify the details." Emily nodded. Her fingers clenched tightly on the counter. She watched Mr. Henderson type something into his computer. The man's frown deepened. He typed again, this time more slowly, as if checking each number. Then he stared at the screen with wide eyes. "Is there a problem, sir?" Emily asked anxiously. "The money is still there, right?" $10,000. Mr. Henderson didn't answer immediately. He picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button, and spoke in a low voice, inaudible to Emily. "Sir, please come to Window 3. There's a priority client immediately." Priority client? Emily was confused. What did that mean? Shortly after, a man who appeared to be the branch manager hurried over. Mr. Henderson pointed to his computer screen. The manager leaned in, looked, and his face immediately turned pale. Then he looked at Emily with an expression that was hard to decipher, a mix of surprise, respect, and disbelief. "Mrs. Miller?" the manager asked in a voice that tried to be as kind as possible, though it trembled slightly. "Yes, that's me," Emily replied, getting more and more scared. "Please accompany me to my office. Let's talk in private." "Henderson, you come too." Emily was led out of the line. The other customers watched her with curiosity. She felt like a captured criminal. Had she made a mistake? Did her father have some debt with this bank? They took her to a very luxurious VIP office on the second floor, very different from the waiting area below. Soft leather sofas, a solid wood table, and the aroma of good coffee. "Please have a seat, Mrs. Miller." "What would you like to drink? Hot tea, coffee?" the manager offered. "Just water, please." "What's going on? Can I withdraw my money?" Emily asked, getting straight to the point. The manager sat across from her while Mr. Henderson stood beside him holding a tablet. "It's not that, ma'am," the manager said slowly. "We're just surprised. This account has been without withdrawal transactions for a very long time. We have to do a verification." Mr. Henderson slid the tablet towards the manager, who in turn placed it in front of Emily. The screen showed her account details. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Henderson said with a trembling voice, "you mentioned you wanted to withdraw $10,000, correct?" "Yes, sir. My entire savings balance." "Mr. Chiu," Henderson swallowed, pointing to the string of numbers on the tablet's screen. "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to confirm. You're referring to 10 million US dollars. Emily looked at that string of numbers. There were so many zeros, and the USD symbol was in front. Her world stopped for the second time in 12 hours. No, Emily whispered. That can't be right. There must be a mistake. My father was just an ordinary manager. $10,000, sir. Not millions. Mr. Henderson gently shook his head. The data is very clear, ma'am. Your current balance is not $10 dollars. Your balance is 10,450,000 US dollars, and that's not including other assets. Emily fell silent. She stared at the number, $10 million. If she converted it to local currency, the figure was too large to calculate. Her head was spinning. She felt like she was going to faint. Emily gripped the arm of the sofa tightly. The air-conditioned room suddenly felt suffocating. You must be joking, she hissed. This makes no sense. My father died 10 years ago. He was a simple state employee. How could he possibly have this much money? The manager signaled to Mr. Henderson, who immediately offered her a glass of water. Drink this first, ma'am. Calm down. This is not a mistake. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Henderson began very carefully, this account is not a common savings account as you thought. It's a trust fund prepared by your late father. A trust? Emily didn't understand the term at all. Let me explain it simply. Ma'am, Mr. Henderson continued, long before he passed away, your father deposited a considerable amount of assets into our bank. These assets weren't just cash. The $10,000 balance you see in the passbook is just the initial balance when the account was opened 20 years ago. After your father passed away 10 years ago, following his instructions, all his other known assets were transferred from an account in Switzerland, consolidated, and entered into this trust. Since then, these funds have been professionally managed by our wealth management division. Emily was stunned. Switzerland? Her father, the simple man who made her fried rice for breakfast every morning, the man who taught her to ride a bike, the man who always wore the same shirt to the office. That man had an account in Switzerland. The money has continued to grow over these 10 years, Mr. Henderson continued. And your father's instructions were very clear. These funds could not be touched by anyone, including yourself, except in a verified emergency or until a specific time. I knew nothing about this, Emily whispered. It felt like she was reading a novel, not the story of her own life. She remembered her father's words. This is for when you really need it. Her father must have known. But what did he know? Emily looked at Mr. Henderson. So, can I withdraw this money? Of course, ma'am. All of this is yours. The manager quickly replied. We can liquidate a portion today if you need cash. We can also prepare premium debit and credit cards in your name right now. Money. Suddenly, she had so much money. She could buy dozens of houses like the one Mark had taken from her. She could buy hundreds of cars. But that wasn't what occupied Emily's mind. What she was thinking was, why? Why had her father done all this? Why had he kept it a secret? Wait, Mr. Henderson said again. His face turned serious again. There's something else, ma'am. This is perhaps the most important thing. Emily looked at him. Her heart began to pound again. In addition to the fund management instructions, Mr. Henderson said as he opened another file on his tablet, there is a very specific automatic instruction. This instruction was activated exactly 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Emily calculated immediately. That was when Apex Global started to take off, when Mark said they had found an incredibly cheap raw material supplier, when Mark started working late frequently and became a little colder. What instruction was that? Emily asked. Your father instructed the bank that on that exact date, 2 years ago, we were to begin using the majority of the funds in this account to aggressively buy shares, and only from one company. Emily's premonition began to unnerve her. Your father ordered us to buy as many shares as possible of one company, Mr. Henderson continued, pausing. He looked at her intently. This company is a private distributor. It's called Orion Logistics. That name. Emily didn't recognize it. She had never heard of that company. She frowned. Orion Logistics? I don't know that company. What does it have to do with me? I don't know either, ma'am, Mr. Henderson said. but the instructions were very clear, and we have been executing them for the past 2 years. Whenever there was an opportunity, we bought their shares from other shareholders. So, how many shares do I have in that company? Mr. Henderson swiped the screen of his tablet, showing her a pie chart. As of yesterday's market close, ma'am, he said in a low voice. This account in your name, Mrs. Miller, now officially holds 60% of the shares of Orion Logistics. You are the majority shareholder. Emily was still confused. She was immensely wealthy. She understood that now. But she was also the owner of an unknown company. What was the point of all this? Excuse me, Mr. Henderson, Emily said. I don't understand what's so special about this company. The manager, who had remained silent, then spoke. Mrs. Miller, I believe this is no coincidence. We did a small internal investigation when this purchase instruction was activated. Orion Logistics is a distributor and supplier of raw materials. Emily was still waiting. The manager continued. They are the exclusive and only distributor in the country for all the main imported raw materials that Apex Global uses. Emily's body tensed. The manager nodded slowly. The company you built with your husband, its success over these 2 years, depends completely on the supply from Orion Logistics, the company you now control. Emily's breath caught. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was a plan, a checkmate prepared by her father 10 years ago. Mr. Henderson added, There is something else, ma'am. There is a safe deposit box linked to this account. We hold the key. According to the instructions, this key is to be given to you if you come to access this account. Mr. Henderson took a small velvet box from a drawer and handed it to Emily. Inside was a heavy brass key. What does it contain? Emily asked. We don't know, ma'am. Only you can open it. Emily's mind began to race. She was no longer a victim, no longer a discarded woman. She had just been given a weapon, a time bomb ready to explode in Mark's hands. Sir, Emily said, her voice no longer trembling. It was cold, calm, and full of determination. Take me to that safe deposit box now. Emily followed Mr. Henderson and the manager down a sterile, silent bank corridor. Her steps, now in simple flat shoes that a female employee had lent her, sounded firm. The cold and hunger that had tormented her at the bus stop had vanished, replaced by a burning adrenaline. She was no longer the discarded Emily. She was her father's daughter, and she had just discovered that her father had not been a simple manager. They arrived in front of a thick steel door guarded by 2 guards. The vault. The manager used his card and then entered a code. The heavy door hissed open, revealing floor-to-ceiling rows of safe deposit boxes, gleaming under the lights. The air was cold and smelled of metal. Please, this way, ma'am, Mr. Henderson said, guiding her to a private cubicle. Shortly after, an employee brought a medium-sized metal box. Mr. Henderson placed it on the table. This is your box, ma'am, number 777. We need your key and our master key to open it. Emily handed him the heavy brass key she had been given. Her heart pounded. Mr. Henderson inserted the master key and turned it. Then he motioned to Emily. Please, ma'am. Emily inserted her key. It fit perfectly. She turned it. A satisfying click was heard. She took a deep breath and opened the lid of the box. The contents were not much. There were no stacks of money or jewelry. Inside, there was only an old passport in her father's name with visa stamps from countries Emily didn't know her father had ever visited, and a thick, sealed brown envelope. On the front of the envelope was written a single phrase, "For my daughter, Emily." It was her father's handwriting, neat, firm, and very recognizable. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. "We'll leave you alone, ma'am," the manager said with understanding. He and Mr. Henderson left Emily alone in the soundproofed cubicle. Emily sat for several moments, just staring at the envelope. Her father had been gone for 10 years, and today she felt his presence again. She carefully broke the seal. Inside were several neatly typewritten sheets of paper. She began to read. Emily, my dearest daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means 2 things. First, that I have been gone for a long time. Second, that you are in serious trouble. As serious as I feared it would be. I hope this day would never have come. I hope you would open this in your old age just out of curiosity. But I know my hopes were perhaps too high. Tears began to well up in Emily's eyes. I have to ask for your forgiveness, my child. I lied to you your whole life. I wasn't just an ordinary manager. A long time ago, before you were born, your grandfather, my father, bequeathed me a small investment firm in Europe. I developed it quietly. I have enough money to make us live like kings, but I chose not to. I wanted you to grow up normally. I wanted you to learn to work hard, to value money, to become an independent woman. I didn't want you to grow up spoiled. Forgive my selfishness. Emily sobbed quietly. So the simplicity of her life had been a choice, an act. She continued reading. You brought Mark home. I recognized him immediately. His name, his face. He is the son of Richard, a business associate from my past. You don't know this, but Mark's family is a greedy one. His father was a man who justified any means to get what he wanted. He once swindled me in a big project early in my career. I know his nature. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. When I saw the way Mark looked at you, I didn't see love. I saw a predator who had found easy prey. He saw you, my kind, hardworking, naive, and overly trusting daughter. You were the perfect tool for him. You have a work ethic, and you have a father he believed was just an ordinary manager, incapable of protecting you. I wanted to forbid you. I wanted to scream at you that he was a bad man, but I know your heart. You were in love. If I had forbidden it, you would have only grown closer to him and further from me. You would have thought I was an old-fashioned father obstructing your happiness. So I chose another path. I kept silent. I pretended to like him at your wedding, but that very day, the day you got married, I started building my plan. I prepared this trust, transferred all my assets to it, and began to research the core of the business plan Mark so often spoke to you about. I knew he was ambitious. He would surely want to build a company, and so he did. Mark wanted to get into the manufacturing business. I knew that business depended on raw materials. I used my connections abroad and spent a lot of money to acquire a small distribution company, Orion Logistics. I made it the sole license holder for the vital raw materials Mark would need. I purposely hid this company. I made it look like a small, insignificant company. Then I waited. When your company, Apex Global, began to establish itself, I instructed Orion Logistics to give them the lowest prices, unbelievably low. That was the miracle that made your company take off 2 years ago. Mark thought he was brilliant, a genius, but I was just feeding him. I purposely made him addicted to the supply from Orion Logistics. The instruction to the bank was activated 2 years ago because I calculated that at that point, Mark would begin to show his true colors. When he felt successful, when he felt on top, he would discard you, keeping all the fruits of your labor. I know this will happen, my child. Forgive me for not being able to prevent it directly. Emily cried uncontrollably. Her father knew. Her father had predicted the previous night, the expulsion, the humiliation. Now she read the last paragraph of the letter. You have been betrayed. You must feel shattered. But lift your head, Emily. You are not a victim. I did not raise you to be a victim. Mark took the company you built with your sweat. He took Apex Global. But he doesn't know that Apex Global is just the body. It cannot live without its heart. Orion Logistics is that heart. And now you hold that heart in your hands. Use it, my child. Use everything I left you, the money, the power, that company. Take back what is rightfully yours. Make him pay for every tear you shed. I may not be able to be with you, but I have already given you the sword. Now go and fight. I am always proud of you. The letter ended there. Emily sat in silence for a long time. Her tears stopped flowing. What remained was fire. A cold, focused fire of anger. She folded the letter carefully. She took her father's passport. She put everything back in the safe. She left the cubicle. Mr. Henderson and the manager looked at her with concern. The face of Emily they saw now was not that of the confused woman who had entered earlier. Her face was serene, cold, and her eyes radiated a terrifying determination. Sir, Emily said to the manager, her voice no longer hoarse but firm, I need several things. First, transfer 100 $200 to a new account in my name. I need cash and a premium debit card right now. Second, I want the best team of lawyers this bank has. I want to meet with them in an hour. Third, I want a full report on Orion Logistics and all its contracts with Apex Global on my desk before lunch. The manager was stunned for a moment, then nodded quickly. Of course, Mrs. Miller. We'll prepare it immediately. One more thing. Emily looked at her reflection in the glass. Her clothes were still dirty and wrinkled. Please call the manager of the best boutique in the city. Tell them to meet me in the best hotel suite you can book for me. I need to buy some new clothes. A week passed. For Mark and Jessica, it was the most beautiful week of their lives. Emily had disappeared without a trace. Mark assumed that woman would be too ashamed to show up. She was probably crying somewhere, maybe at a distant relative's house or in some shabby little room. Mark didn't care. He had already blocked Emily's number and ordered the security guard at Apex Global not to let her in under any circumstances. Apex Global was now completely his. And Jessica, with her new status as the future Mrs. Mark, took control immediately. She moved into Mark's house and threw out all of Emily's belongings. She ordered a new sports car with company money. She had even begun to completely remodel Mark's office, replacing all the simple furniture chosen by Emily with an imported marble desk and luxurious leather chairs. That day was the climax. Mark had called an emergency board meeting, the main topic, to officially announce his divorce status and appoint Jessica as the new CFO, replacing Emily's position, who for years had worked without an official title. At 10 a.m., the main boardroom of Apex Global was full. Some senior managers who had been hired by Emily looked uncomfortable. They knew how much she had worked, but Mark was the owner of the company. They could do nothing. Mark sat in the head chair at the end of the table. He smiled broadly, radiating an aura of victory. Jessica sat to his right, wearing a flashy red dress, amusing herself by playing with her expensive pen. Good morning, everyone. Mark opened the meeting with a powerful voice. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I have several important announcements that will determine the bright future of Apex Global. The managers remained silent, waiting. As you probably already know, Mark continued, my relationship with Emily is over. We are officially divorced. He said it lightly, as if announcing a change of coffee supplier. And to fill the vacancy in management, I am proud to present. Just as Mark was about to mention Jessica's name, the solid oak boardroom door swung open. Everyone turned. Two men in expensive suits with serious faces entered first, like bodyguards. Behind them, the steady click of high heels on the marble floor could be heard. And then she walked in. The entire room fell silent. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Jessica, who had been admiring her nails, looked up and her eyes widened. It was Emily, but it wasn't the Emily they knew. It wasn't Emily with her simple, worn hijab with a tired, makeup-free face. The woman standing in the doorway was someone completely different. She wore a perfectly tailored ivory-white palazzo pantsuit, paired with an emerald silk blouse. Her hijab was arranged with elegance and neatness, made of a luxurious chiffon fabric that matched her blouse. Her face had subtle but professional makeup, highlighting her eyes that now looked cold and sharp. She no longer looked like a victim. She looked like a queen. Emily. Mark was the first to speak, his tone a mix of surprise and anger. How dare you come here? Security! Who let her in? Emily smiled slightly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked calmly into the room, flanked by the two men in suits who turned out to be senior lawyers from one of the country's largest law firms. Good morning, Mark. Emily's voice was calm and clear, filling the silent room. Sorry, did I interrupt your party? What do you want? Mark hissed, trying to regain his authority. You have no business here anymore. This company is mine. That house is mine. You are nobody. Jessica chimed in, her voice sarcastic. Well, well, found a new sugar daddy already? Managed to buy yourself some expensive clothes? But what a pity, a beggar is still a beggar. Get out of here. Emily didn't even look at Jessica. Her eyes were fixed directly on Mark. It's true. Apex Global is yours. Mark. I've already reviewed the documents. Very clever, I admit, Emily said. She walked slowly around the table, making all the managers hold their breath. But, she continued, a manufacturing company, however powerful, cannot produce if it has no raw materials, right? Mark began to feel uneasy. What do you mean? I spent this week learning, Emily said. And I found an interesting fact. All of Apex Global's success over the last 2 years depends entirely on a single supplier. A supplier that gave you magical prices so your profits could soar, right? Mark's face began to pale. Orion Logistics, Emily said, pronouncing the name like a spell. Your main supplier of raw materials, the supplier that has an exclusive contract you cannot cancel. What does that have to do with you? Mark shouted. One of Emily's lawyers stepped forward and placed a thick stack of documents on the table, right in front of Mark. As of last week, the lawyer said in a flat voice, our client, Mrs. Miller, has assumed ownership of the majority shareholding of Orion Logistics, equivalent to 60%. Silence. Mark looked at the documents, then at Emily. He didn't understand. 60%? Mark whispered. How? That's not possible. Emily was now standing at the other end of the table, directly opposite Mark. So, Emily said in a light but terrifying tone, the agenda for this board meeting seems to be wrong. You can't appoint a new CFO because Apex Global is in serious trouble. What trouble? The trouble, Emily said, is that your main supplier, that is me, is going to halt all shipments of raw materials, effective immediately. The entire room erupted in murmurs. The managers panicked. Without raw materials, production would stop. The big contract they had just won would completely fail. The company would go bankrupt in a matter of weeks. Mark jumped out of his chair. You can't do that. There's a contract. I'll sue you. Oh, go ahead, Emily said calmly. My lawyers have already reviewed it. There's a small clause on page 20 of your contract. Orion Logistics has the right to review prices and delivery schedules at any time if there is a change of ownership in either party. And it seems Apex Global has just experienced a change. That is, you just divorced your partner. Mark was trembling. He was trapped. He had never read the details of that contract. Emily looked at Mark, then at Jessica. Then her gaze swept over all the managers present in the room. Then she walked to the head chair, the chair Mark occupied. Mark, whether out of surprise or fear, instinctively took a step back. Emily smiled coldly. She looked at Mark, pale as a sheet, and Jessica, whose face was now as red as a boiled lobster. Excuse me, Emily said as her voice resonated. I believe the agenda for today's meeting needs to change. We are not going to discuss the appointment of Miss Jessica. She placed her new handbag on the table. We are going to discuss how all of you are going to beg me to keep this company from going bankrupt. So Mark, please sit down. Emily pointed to another chair next to him. As the majority shareholder of your main supplier, I believe I will be chairing this meeting. The boardroom seemed to have run out of oxygen. Mark looked at Emily, then at the pile of documents, and back at Emily. His face, once pale, was now red with fury. Are you threatening me? He growled. Do you think I'm stupid? I'll find another supplier. I'll cancel the contract with Orion Logistics. Jessica, whose brain wasn't as quick as Mark's in business matters, also chimed in. Exactly. Who do you think you are? Mark can find 100 suppliers better than your company. Emily smiled slightly. She looked at the lawyer beside her. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Mr. Davis, spoke. His voice was calm but lethal. Mr. Johnson, I suggest you read your contract more carefully. The contract you signed with Orion Logistics 5 years ago and renewed 2 years ago is an exclusive license agreement. What does that mean? Mark asked, his voice starting to waver. It means, Mr. Davis continued, that the main raw material, Type 77B, which is the core component of Apex Global's production, the import and distribution license for the entire national territory is held solely by Orion Logistics. There is, I repeat, no other company in this country that can legally import or sell it. You cannot find another supplier. Mark fell silent. He turned to look at the head of production, Mr. Peterson, sitting at the end of the table. Daniel, is that true? Mr. Peterson, a man sweating profusely, swallowed. He didn't dare to look at Mark. He could only nod slightly. It's true, sir. That formula is very specific. All the machinery in our plant is specially configured to process material 77B. If we change raw materials, We would have to replace the entire production line. That would cost millions and take at least a year. Checkmate. Everyone in the room now understood. Apex Global could not operate without Orion Logistics. Mark had built his kingdom on foundations that belonged to someone else, and that someone was the woman he had just cast aside. Mark trembled. Cold sweat began to soak his expensive suit. He thought of the big contract he had just won. That project had a 3-month deadline. Without raw materials, he would not only lose the profits, he would be sued for millions for failing to fulfill the contract. He was bankrupt. His arrogant demeanor vanished instantly. He looked at Emily with a different expression. She was no longer his frumpy wife. She was his adversary. "Emily," he said, his voice now softening, trying the negotiation route. All right, I get it. You won. You're smart. I apologize for hurting you." Jessica's eyes widened. "Mark, what are you doing? Why are you apologizing to her?" Mark ignored Jessica, focusing on Emily. "Emily, don't destroy our company. This is the result of your work, too. You wouldn't want to see all this destroyed, would you? Okay, what do you want? Money? I'll give it to you. Do you want half of my assets? Take them. Take the house. Take the car. But please don't stop the supply of raw materials." Emily laughed briefly, a cold, humorless laugh. "Our company? How funny, Mark. Didn't you say in your bedroom in front of your mistress that I was a fool? That I worked like a dog so you two could enjoy all this? Didn't you legally ensure that this company was 100% yours?" Emily approached the table, placing both palms on the cold wooden surface. "You're right. This is your company, not my company. I no longer have any feelings for Apex Global." Mark's face turned pale again. "Then what do you want?" "Me?" Emily smiled. "I'm just a businesswoman, and as the owner of Orion Logistics, I'm here to collect a debt." "Debt?" Mark was confused. "What do you mean? Apex Global has no debts. Our financial statements are clean. We always pay all our invoices on time." He turned to look at Jessica, whom he had appointed as the impromptu CFO. Jessica nodded in panic. "It's true. Our payments are current." "Oh, your payments are current," Emily said, "but you've been paying the wrong price." Mr. Davis opened another folder of documents. This was the second folder. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "it seems you never read the financial statements from your supplier's side. For the last 2 years, the former owner of Orion Logistics, Mrs. Miller's late father, intentionally gave you a 90% discount." "What?" Mark exclaimed. "The price you paid," Mr. Davis continued, "was only 10% of the actual price of the raw materials. The remaining 90% was recorded by Orion Logistics as accounts receivable, as a trade debt from Apex Global. That was a strategy by the former owner to help you grow." Mark felt the floor beneath his feet crumble. "No, that's not possible." "That's business," Emily corrected. "My father gave you capital in a way you didn't notice. You were so busy counting profits that you forgot to see the pile of debt you actually had." "How much?" Mark hissed. "How much is the debt?" Mr. Davis turned to the last page of the document and pointed to the number at the bottom. "The total accumulated principal debt of Apex Global to Orion Logistics over the last 2 years, plus the default interest that was automatically triggered because you violated a contract clause, is $3.5 million. $3.5 million. That number echoed through the room. The managers gasped. Jessica nearly fainted. It was an impossible figure. Not even the total asset value of the company reached that amount. "And," Mr. Davis added, "according to the credit agreement you signed, this debt is due immediately upon a change of ownership at Orion Logistics, which means the debt is due today. Right now." Mark collapsed into his chair. It was over. It was really over. He didn't have $3.5 million. He didn't even have $500,000. All his money had been spent on luxury cars, the apartment for Jessica, and his new lifestyle. Emily walked calmly over to Mark, who sat slumped. She looked at the man who had destroyed her life with a cold gaze. "You have 2 options, Mark," Emily said in a low but clear voice. "1, you pay the $3.5 million right now in cash to Orion Logistics' account." "I don't have it," Mark moaned. "I know. Emily cut him off. So you only have the second option. Emily took one last document from Mr. Davis and placed it in front of Mark. It was a share purchase agreement. You give me 100% of your shareholding in Apex Global, Emily said. All of it in my name, in exchange for the full settlement of your debt. You walk out of here with nothing, just like you threw me out. That night, Mark looked at the document, then at Jessica, who was crying hysterically. Then he looked at Emily. In that woman's eyes, he saw no trace of love or compassion, only cold justice. Sign, Emily ordered. Trembling, Mark picked up the pen on the table, the expensive pen he had bought yesterday, and with a hand heavier than steel, he stamped his signature on the paper. He had just handed over everything. His company, his dreams, his luxuries. Everything was now Emily's. After the ink on that signature dried, the atmosphere in the boardroom changed completely. Mr. Davis and his team immediately handled the legal formalities of the asset transfer. Within 30 minutes legally, Emily was the sole owner of Apex Global. Mark sat there, empty. His status was now nobody. Jessica was still sobbing, her makeup streaked and ruined. Emily walked to the head chair at the end of the table, the chair previously occupied by Mark. She sat down calmly. The managers, who were previously tense, now looked at her with a mixture of fear and respect. They awaited the first orders from their new queen. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily began, her voice calm but authoritative. I know this is surprising, but I want to make something clear. I have no problem with Apex Global. I helped build this company. I know our potential. She looked at the managers one by one. I know which of you have worked honestly and who have just been sycophants. Starting today, Apex Global will be completely restructured. For those who want to continue working with honesty and professionalism, your job is secure. I will even increase your salary. A sigh of relief went through the room. However, Emily continued, I hate thieves, I hate traitors, and I hate those who abuse trust. Her gaze now fell on Mark and Jessica. Both of them flinched. You two, Emily said, don't move from your seats. Do you think after signing this, our business is finished? Do you think I'm just going to let you go like that? Mark looked up. What more do you want, Emily? You've already taken everything. I took what was rightfully mine, Emily corrected, but I haven't yet calculated what you stole from me. Emily glanced towards the door. Come in. The door opened again. This time, it wasn't lawyers who entered, but 3 serious-looking people in white shirts carrying large laptop bags. They were an independent forensic audit team that Emily had prepared for 3 days. My first order as the new owner, Emily said to the entire room, is a full forensic audit of all company expenses for the past 2 years, especially those related to Mr. Johnson and Miss Thompson. Jessica's already pale face turned white as a sheet. Mark gripped the arms of his chair tightly. This was worse than he expected. Security, Emily called. 2 guards who were waiting outside entered immediately. Please watch Mr. Johnson and Miss Thompson. Ensure they remain in this room. Do not allow them to touch their phones or computers. Audit team, you may begin your work. I want all laptops and files from Mark's and Jessica's offices confiscated immediately. The audit team moved quickly. They immediately took Mark's and Jessica's laptops from the table. Mark tried to resist, but the guards stopped him. You have no right to do this, Mark shouted. I am the owner of this company. I have the right, Emily replied coldly. This audit will be conducted openly, here, in front of all the managers, so they know what kind of leader they had before. This was a public humiliation. An audit that should be confidential was now being exposed in front of his subordinates. For the next 4 hours, the boardroom became a psychological torture chamber for Mark and Jessica. The audit team connected both their laptops to the large projector. One by one, their shames were exposed. First, Jessica's account. The purchase of a luxury sports car for $150. Euro 0 was found. Date of purchase, 3 days after Emily was kicked out. Source of funds, Apex Global's operating account. Title holder, Jessica Thompson's personal name. The managers were aghast. Second, Mark's expenses. Dozens of invoices for business trips to Cancun, Miami, and Las Vegas were found. But curiously, there were always 2 first-class tickets. The auditor traced the name of the second passenger. It was always Jessica. They never met with clients. These were luxury vacations paid for with company money. Third, the house remodeling. An invoice for $50,000 for the interior renovation of the house was found, the same house where Emily was thrown out, paid by Apex Global, even though that house was now de facto used by Mark for his personal benefit. Fourth, and most serious, the audit team found a series of large transfers to a consulting company called Jessica Bright Consulting. The total reached $200 in the last 6 months for image consulting services. The audit team quickly verified the company's profile. The owner was Jessica. The company was a shell. The address was fake. It was the way they had systematically siphoned money from the company. Mark and Jessica had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. After all the evidence was displayed on the screen, the room fell silent. The managers looked at Mark and Jessica with disgust. Only now did they realize that while they worked hard, their leaders were partying with the money from their efforts. Emily rose from her chair, walked over to Mark. "You said I was foolish," Emily whispered. "You said I worked like a dog so you could enjoy this. You were right. But you forgot something, Mark. The horse that works the hardest is the one that knows every blade of grass in the field. I designed the financial system of this company from scratch. I know every loophole that exists." Mark couldn't say anything. He was destroyed. "This," Emily said, "is no longer just a matter of debt. It's no longer just a matter of divorce." Emily returned to her desk, picked up her phone, looked at Mark, then at Jessica, who was crying silently. "This is a criminal offense. Embezzlement, fraud, money laundering." Emily dialed a number. "Hello, good afternoon. I want to report a crime of corporate embezzlement at Apex Global. The responsible parties are in front of me right now." Jessica screamed hysterically. "No, Emily, don't! I beg you, I'll return the money." Mark tried to flee. He jumped from his chair and ran towards the door, but the 2 guards were already prepared. They subdued him and threw him to the floor. "Please, Emily, forgive me. Don't call the police." Mark groaned from the floor. His ego was completely shattered. Emily looked at her ex-husband, now prostrating himself at her feet, restrained by the guards. She looked at the woman who had destroyed her home, now hysterical with fear. She felt nothing, no pity, no compassion. She just looked at Mark coldly and said, "You should have thought of that before you threw me out that night." The police arrived 30 minutes later. Mark and Jessica were handcuffed in front of all the managers. They were taken out of the company they thought was theirs. As they passed by Emily, Mark looked at her, full of hatred. Emily just returned his gaze without expression. Then she turned to face her managers. "Our meeting," she said, as if nothing had happened, "will continue. Let's clean up this mess and rebuild our company." 6 months had passed since the day of the arrest. 6 months that felt like hell for Mark and Jessica, and like a new dawn for Emily. Mark and Jessica spent their time in detention cells. Their assets, including the sports car and Jessica's luxury apartment, had been frozen by the prosecutor's office. They couldn't afford the expensive lawyers they used to use. Mark tried to contact all his business connections, but no one wanted to help him. The news about the embezzlement and the takeover of Apex Global by the owner of its supplier had spread like wildfire. Mark's name was ruined in the business world. He was poison. Jessica, on the other hand, was physically and mentally destroyed. Without expensive spa treatments, without luxury clothes, she reverted to her original form. She cried every day, blaming Mark for her fate. In interrogations, she revealed everything she knew, trying to save herself by blaming Mark for everything. She admitted she only did what she was told, that she was forced, that she was threatened. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from various business and crime media outlets vied for the front seats. In the back rows sat some veteran employees of Apex Global, including Mr. Peterson, who had come to show their support for Emily. Mark and Jessica entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing orange prison uniforms. A stark contrast. Mark, who was once handsome in his expensive suits, now looked haggard, his eyes sunken, and his hair messy. Jessica, once glamorous, was now pale, without makeup, her eyes swollen from crying. Then Emily entered. She didn't enter through the common door. She entered through the witness door. accompanied by Mr. Davis and her legal team. She wore an elegant but simple navy blue blouse and a matching hijab. She walked tall, her face serene. She sat in the front row, right in front of Mark. Their eyes met for a moment. Mark quickly looked away. He couldn't bear it. There was hatred, shame, but above all, fear in Mark's eyes. The trial began. The prosecutor laid out the charges. One by one, the evidence of their crimes was presented to the judge. Photos of Jessica's sports car, bank statements of the fictitious company, Jessica Bright Consulting, proof of transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars from Apex Global's accounts to Jessica's personal accounts, tickets for their overseas vacations paid with corporate credit cards. Mark's lawyer, a public defender who looked exhausted, tried to argue. "Your Honor," he said, "this is purely a family matter. It's the revenge of a divorced wife. My client, Mr. Johnson, is the founder of Apex Global. That money was his. How can he steal from his own company?" The prosecutor smiled sarcastically. "Your Honor, the defense attorney's argument is flawed. Apex Global is a separate legal entity. Even though Mr. Johnson was the 100% owner, he could not take money from the company for personal purposes without following the procedures of a shareholders' meeting or dividend distribution. What he did is embezzlement, and that is a criminal offense." Then Mark's lawyer played his last card. "My client was framed. Mrs. Miller, through her company Orion Logistics, deliberately created a fictitious debt of $3.5 million to force my client to surrender his shares. This is theft, not law enforcement." Mr. Davis, sitting behind the prosecutor, gave a signal. The prosecutor nodded. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the matter of the $3.5 million and the share transfer is a separate civil case that has already been settled. Mr. Johnson voluntarily signed the share transfer agreement to settle his commercial debt. That has no bearing on the criminal case we are trying today." The prosecutor turned. "Today's case is about the $200,000 they stole through a shell company, about the $150 Euro for Miss Thompson's sports car, about the hundreds of thousands for their vacations. This is theft of corporate funds, done knowingly and systematically, and we have a witness." The prosecutor called the witness Miss Jessica Thompson. Everyone was surprised. Jessica would be a witness. Jessica was seated on the witness stand. She trembled violently. Her lawyer had advised her that cooperating was the only way to reduce her sentence. "Miss Thompson," the prosecutor asked, "are you the owner of the company Jessica Bright Consulting?" Jessica looked at Mark. Mark stared at her, threateningly. Jessica lowered her head. "Yes, sir." "Did that company actually provide image consulting services to Apex Global?" I don't know, sir." "Do not lie under oath, Miss Thompson. What services did you provide?" "None," Jessica cried hysterically. "There were no services. It was Mark's idea. He said it was an easy way to get money out of the company without Emily noticing. He ordered me to create it. I just signed what they told me to. He said he loved me. He promised he would marry me." The gavel banged. "Order in the court." Mark jumped from his seat. "Lies! She planned everything. She's a gold digger. She poisoned me against my wife. She's a tramp." "Defendant Johnson, sit down," the judge ordered. The courtroom was in chaos. The two antagonists were now attacking each other, blaming each other, exposing their own shames in public. Finally, Emily was called as a witness. She took the stand calmly. "Ma'am," the prosecutor said, "you are the current owner of Apex Global and were previously the wife of the defendant Mark Johnson. Did you know about these expenses?" "I did not know the specific details," Emily said. "I designed the financial system of Apex Global from scratch, but in the last 2 years, Mr. Johnson took full control of access to the main account. He told me to just focus on operations, that he would handle the strategic finances. I trusted him. I only knew the extent of the theft after the forensic audit team came in." Emily's voice was calm, flat, and professional. There was no resentment, only facts. It was precisely this calmness that made her testimony even more devastating. She didn't seem like a jealous wife. She seemed like a CEO who had been robbed by her own employees. Mark's lawyer tried to attack her. "Mrs. Miller, aren't you resentful? You control Orion Logistics. You knew your husband was cheating on you. Then you trapped him with debt and this audit. This is all revenge. Emily looked at the lawyer. Sir, if your wallet is stolen, would you stay silent or report it to the police? I was robbed. I reported it to the police. If it turns out the thief is someone I know, is that my fault? I only took back what was rightfully mine and sued for what they stole. The matter of my pain is a personal issue. The missing funds are a legal issue. The lawyer fell silent. He had lost, resoundingly. After a trial that lasted 8 hours, the judge finally went into deliberation. Mark and Jessica slumped in their seats. They knew they had lost. 2 hours later, the judge returned. The courtroom fell silent. After considering the evidence, the presiding judge said in a grave voice, "The testimonies of the witnesses, the confession of the defendant Jessica Thompson, and the attempts by the defendant Mark Johnson to lie in court. The court has decided that the defendant Mark Johnson and the defendant Jessica Thompson are legally guilty of committing the crimes of embezzlement and money laundering jointly." Jessica began to sob violently. The judge continued, "For the acts that have harmed the company and its employees, for abusing trust, and for attempting to conceal evidence, the court imposes a sentence on the defendant Mark Johnson of 15 years in prison, and on the defendant Jessica Thompson of 10 years in prison, in addition to a fine to restitute all losses totaling $250,000. The gavel banged. "No!" Jessica screamed hysterically. She tried to run, but the officers caught her. "Mark, this is all your fault. I hate you. You ruined my life." Mark didn't react. He sat there silently. His eyes were empty. It was over. 15 years. His life was over. He looked at Emily, who was still sitting calmly in her seat. He looked at the woman he once called a foolish mule. That woman now looked at him without hatred, without love, without any emotion, as if looking at a stranger. As Mark and Jessica were led out by the officers, Jessica was still screaming hysterically. Emily stood up, smoothed her blouse. She didn't need to see the end of that drama. Her business was finished. She turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving her dark past behind forever. 1 year later, the building that was once called Apex Global stood even more imposing, but its name had changed. A large silver plaque gleamed in the main lobby with the inscription, "The Adam Group," the name taken from Emily's late father, Adam Miller. Emily had conducted a total rebranding. She discarded the name Apex Global, which held bitter memories, and replaced it with a name that symbolized heritage and honor. The atmosphere inside the office had also changed drastically. The walls, once painted a dull gray by Mark, were now glass panels and ivory white walls, giving a sense of openness, transparency, and modernity. The super luxurious black marble desk in the lobby that Jessica had bought had disappeared, replaced by a green vertical garden and a comfortable waiting area for visitors. Emily stepped out of her private elevator. She was no longer the Emily who wore simple, worn hijabs. That day, she wore an elegant cream-colored blazer paired with a silk hijab with a delicate print. Her steps were firm and full of confidence. Employees who passed her greeted her with respect and warmth. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." "Good morning," Emily replied with a smile. Emily's first order after taking control of the company a year earlier was not to fire people. Her first order was to increase the salary of all operational employees and loyal senior staff like Mr. Peterson by 30%. She also built a free daycare on the ground floor of the building for female employees with children. She knew all too well what it felt like to struggle as a working woman. She destroyed the sycophantic culture Mark had created and replaced it with a culture of meritocracy. Emily entered her office. It was the same room Mark had once used, but the contents had changed completely. The arrogant, solid teak wood desk and the leather chair that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that Mark had left, she had donated. Now her office was furnished with modern, functional, and tasteful furniture. On the wall, there were no photos of Mark playing golf. There was a photo of Emily with all her employees during the company's field day, and on her desk, there was only one photo in a simple silver frame. The photo of her father, smiling with pride. She sat down and opened her laptop. The day's schedule was full. She saw the stack of business newspapers her assistant had prepared. In a corner of the front page was a small news item. Confiscated assets of defendant Mark Johnson failed to sell at third auction. Emily read it briefly without expression. The assets bought by Mark and Jessica with stolen money had continuously lost value. Both were now in separate prisons, and according to reports, Jessica was suffering from severe depression, while Mark had become the target of ridicule by other inmates. Emily closed the newspaper. They were no longer her concern. There was a knock on her office door. "Come in." Mr. Peterson, the head of production, entered with a beaming face. "Good morning, ma'am. This quarter's production report is ready. We exceeded our target by 20%. "Good work, Mr. Peterson," Emily said sincerely. "How is the new machinery from Germany?" "It's already installed, ma'am. Thanks to that machinery and the stable supply of Type 77B raw material from Orion Logistics, our efficiency has increased dramatically. We no longer depend on magical prices, but we have healthy and sustainable profits." "Excellent," Emily said. "Please convey my thanks to the entire plant team. The quarterly bonus will be deposited next week." Mr. Peterson smiled broadly. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you very much. You really saved us all." After Mr. Peterson left, Emily prepared for her most important meeting of the day, the joint board meeting of the Atom Group and Orion Logistics. For the past year, Emily had run both companies separately, Orion Logistics as the supplier, and the Atom Group as the producer. But today, she would unite her father's legacy. She stood before the large boardroom filled with executives from both companies. "Good morning, everyone," Emily began. "For a year, we have worked hard cleaning up the mess of the past and building new foundations. The Atom Group is healthy. Orion Logistics has grown. Both are leaders in their respective fields." She paused, looking at everyone with confidence. "But," she continued, "I see a bigger future. My father created Orion Logistics as the heart, and we built the Atom Group as the body. Starting today, I want no more separation. I officially announce that Orion Logistics and the Atom Group will undergo a full merger, forming a single entity, the Atom Group." The room was silent for a moment, then erupted in enthusiastic applause. They understood this was a genius move. They would dominate the market from end to end, from the import of raw materials to the finished product. No one could disrupt them. Emily smiled. Her father's plan was complete. That afternoon at 5 o'clock, the office began to empty. Emily organized her things. She no longer worked late. She didn't need to work like a dog. She worked smart. She already had an excellent team she trusted. She stood in front of the huge window of her office, watching the sunset color the city sky. Before, from this window, she only saw endless piles of work for the wrong man. Now she saw a business empire she had built on honesty and her own effort. She turned and looked at her father's photo on the desk. "Dad," she whispered softly, "I didn't just get it back. I made it grow 10 times bigger. See, Dad? We did it." Emily took her bag, turned off the lights in her office, leaving the darkness behind. She walked out of her office, passing through the lobby filled with employees leaving on time to meet their families. She walked out of the Atom Group building, no longer as a discarded victim, but as a CEO, a winner. A woman who found her strength at her lowest point and rebuilt her world, much more beautiful than before. If this story made you reflect on the power of perseverance, on how karma always finds its way, and on the unconditional love of a father who protects his daughter even from beyond the grave, tell me in the comments what impacted you the most. Have you ever experienced a similar betrayal? Do you think Emily was right to take revenge in that way? I would love to read your opinion. If you like this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories. Your support helps us continue creating content that excites you and makes you think. See you in the next one.